Hello, and welcome to Hacking People's Mind when threat actors master social engineering. For audio or video issues, please click the technical support button below. I'd now like to turn it over to Tal Darson and Dana Peleg for the presentation.
Okay, hey everyone. So welcome and joining into our session today. So what are we going to discuss about are a couple of recent things, such as the recent changes in the digital world. This is all part of what we're just seeing across the entire world as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also going to see how threats are changed and how they adapted to the recent pandemic that's going on, usually coming from a social engineering aspect. We're going to go on a small deep dive into a few and different threats. And of course, by the end of this session, we're going to present you with some countermeasure and useful tips of how to protect yourself. So going right in, we will cover threats from different types of scopes. We're going to go into the web type of threats, and we're going to touch on desktop malware, rat malware, of course, phishing and smishing, and how spoofing is part of this. Later on, we're going to touch on the mobile domain when we're going to discuss one of the most prominent threats in that space, which is the mobile overlay malware. This is really advanced, and we have a really cool demo to show you. This is relevant for the Android mobile operating system, of course. And of course, we're going to touch on how social engineering, which is our major theme in that presentation, is being involved in any of these attacks. So digital transformation is accelerated. And why it's accelerated? Well, COVID-19 is actually one of the major reasons of why a lot of businesses these days are going into digital, right? Even businesses that didn't have this before, they're just going and adding it, whether it's like in these domains you're seeing here in this slide, whether it's like insurance, telecommunications, travel and transportation. Online banking was already there, right? But it's just expanding and going more and more digital. So we're going to see how threats are being impacting. So when we see rise in threats, so we see them usually happening, as I said, part of the digital transformation, and when just accelerating and threats are just looking for new targets. Of course, when there is a holiday season, and what we see just right before it, we see a major rise in threats targeting, usually if we're talking about fraud and users around the world, we see a major increase in that as well. And of course, the COVID-19, when everyone are working from home right now, it's one of the major reasons of the attacks that being, broader, and they actually adapted to this time. So how COVID-19 changed the threat landscape? So first of all, as I said, the digital transformation basically accelerated, and now a lot of new businesses are open up digitally, which means that more and more threat actors are knowing that, and they're leveraging that. And once there are a lot of unsecured businesses, for example, when a business just, go up live with a new platform, new online platform, these businesses made it so fast that they didn't have the right security measures in place. So a lot of threat actors are knowing that, and they're looking for these targets, these new targets, to actually place in their target list. What else we know is that a lot of people are now working from home, actually increase the amount of unmanaged corporate devices that are now can be found worldwide. Whether there was a business before COVID-19 that, came to the office and just used their own corporate protected, let's put it this way, devices, these days, a lot of businesses just tell their employees, okay, use your own computers. And this is a serious, and open up for threats, basically, and vulnerabilities, of course, to go over these unmanaged computers, these unmanaged devices, and just target them. And of course, due to those two reasons, what we see is the attacks in the magnitude in these attacks, of course. It's just rising and rising, especially when we were in the first wave of COVID-19 around the world. And of course, we're going to see in that session how the attacks are actually adapted themselves to these times. So I'm not going to stay here too much, and we'll just go deep dive into these. So I want to start with desktop malware. So in desktop malware, we're going to discuss the top noted threats that we're seeing recently, usually coming from our perspective, from our labs. So the first one is remote access Trojans. Then we're going to touch on a little bit about information stealers because they're really popular. And we're going to end up with banking Trojans, which not going anywhere. So what we see in the remote access Trojans domain, we have, let's put it this way, we have three types of tools that can be gathered as part of attacks in that manner. First one is tools that can be purchased on dark web, for example. There are plenty of commercial tools, commercial remote access Trojans that are being sold over there. They are the ones who have been modified for malicious purposes as part of their legitimate use. For example, a malicious TeamViewer or a malicious, an abused TeamViewer that was incorporated into the usage of malware. And of course, there is always pure social engineering attacks that involves remote access tools, legitimate tools, such as TeamViewer, LogMeIn, and all the ones you know from your day-to-day. So I'm going to take one example, the one I said, the first one I gave with a commercial one. When we see an organized threat actors leveraging these tools into their cause, which in our domain, in our space, what we see them is they want to get information, and of course, they want to get money. So how they operating? They're actually being leveraged at techniques coming from advanced persistent threats groups. And these groups they're activating the remote access Trojan. So they're starting with a reconnaissance phase when they're looking for the prey, someone that will be easier to, look for and get into the organization. Usually they will send some kind of an attachment with malicious macro to download the threat. From that phase, they will, look up on their lateral movement phase when they're going to actually go to the person who holds the, for example, the key for the money of the organization, usually a financial officer or financial analyst, which has, the credentials and the ability to log into the business account over the business login financial account over the web, the online banking, of course. And from that point, the fraudster will start to do his espionage. He will try to monitor. Sometimes it could be even take weeks until he finds the right target. And from that point, it could be used by social engineering techniques to do many types of attack vectors, whether it's to take out the money himself or conducting a business email compromise or whatnot. So this is one thing we're seeing, and we're seeing an increase in these attacks. For example, here we have stats from our lab of Nanocore. Nanocore is very popular during these times. And we see the rise in infections during around COVID-19, was just erupted in the world back in April. Other than that, we see also threats and social engineering attempts to deliver them, such as infostealers, of course, that joined the RAT session that I just covered, of different attempts coming from the World Health Organization, coming from the SBA, as they're just think they're going to send some stimulus check, but this is basically going to be some threat in the attachment, as I said, embedded in some Microsoft Office document as a malicious macro, and there's some other more. Now I'm going to touch like another popular vector, which is a remote overlay. Remote overlay is a sub-case of attack that we're seeing as part of the remote access classic Trojans, as I just explained. What this is different is basically we're going to see in a short video that has here. In this attack, what we know is that the attacker will show some, after infection phase, the attacker will show different screens to the user in order to steal second-factor authentication, one-time password, and some other manners of multi-factor authentication. So here we have in this demo, we have a reconstruction of a remote overlay malware that we did in our lab. On the left side of the screen, you see the fraudster screen. On the right side of the screen, you see the victim screen. And in this, in the right side, you see some fake screen that's actually blocking the user screen, telling him that there is some kind of an update that's being going on. In that case, our victim logged into some kind of a cryptocurrency platform that he, just wanted to check out his balance and stuff, maybe send money. But at this time, the fraudster actually taking control. So you can see on the left side of the screen, there are plenty of options that we have reconstructed. And you can send the victim many types of second-factor authentication that the fraudster just customized. So that said, that could be done in order to, ask the fraudster for different types of MFA. What you see now in the current slide is a malware abusing Zoom meetings. We know that in the spirit of the COVID-19, Zoom is probably one of the most popular meeting applications worldwide. So here in that case, we have researched an interesting case of remote overlay malware, which the actual malware doing DLL hijacking. DLL hijacking is a technique when you can take an original binary. For example, in this example, the original binary was Zoom, and load it with a malicious DLL file that actually being loaded up with the malware itself. That causing a lot of other security vendors, antiviruses, and so on to just, not be able to remove that threat or mitigate it really easy. So that said, this is one of the popular techniques that we're seeing worldwide, usually being used with this sort of malware. It's not limited to this specific attack, something we see. Moving on, before I wrap up this session, section, I'm sorry, we see another attacks being abused and delivered COVID-19 with advanced social engineering attacks. These are the notorious examples of two things that we just uncovered a few months ago as it was returned and made a comeback. We didn't see this malware actor operated since 2017. And it just came back with attacks, also carried attacks. Usually Australia and New Zealand was the first target that we saw. And Emotet, when we actually were able to actually spot attacks that were delivered in Japan using a customized social engineering attacks. And we also were the ones to report that well. So these actors that are spreading and continue to spreading financial malware, these ones are basically still operating. They're still using different types of social engineering attacks, usually around these times, around this pandemic. And they're doing it pretty much, let's put it this way, well for their own profit. So from this point, I'm going to hand over to Dana Peleg, which she can going to continue and cover.
Okay, thank you, Tal. So I'm going to discuss some phishing threats and mobile threats, and then we'll summarize and round out the session. So if you talk about phishing, it's something that is a very old threat, and people thought it would go away, but it's here to stay. And if you talk about social engineering and let's say social engineering kingdom, then phishing is this kingdom's king. So what we see is basically, first of all, a rise in phishing sites. We see a growth in top-level domain registration. So it used to be just .org, .com. Now you have .tv, .space, very unique TLDs, top-level domains. We used to tell our grandparents that in order to stay safe from phishing sites, You need to basically have the padlock in the browser. You need to have the HTTPS at the beginning of the URL. And so basically now we know that it's almost no longer even relevant. Fraudsters and attackers are starting to use SSL certificates in their phishing sites. So it's not necessarily means that the communication is safe. We also see a boost in phishing kits with session randomization folder. So what it means is they just create one phishing attack. They hack into just one legitimate domain, and they plant their special kit that actually changes its folder at the end of the URL. It changes the folder and creates a lot of unique URLs. And we're talking about a significant amount, such as thousands of URLs just from one phishing attack. And this is basically going and staying under the radar and is able to overcome a lot of security measures and products. And of course, we're also seeing the statistics of the previous quarters. What we see and what we expect to see basically is that we still don't have the current quarter statistics. So this is 2020 second Q, and we are definitely expecting to see a significant rise due to this pandemic and this period that we are currently on. So if we're talking about the pandemic, we said that people are leveraging everything that is going around right now. So people are around the world, it's a global issue, are very, very, they have an existential fear and financial concerns that they don't know when and if things will actually figure out. And they are also utilizing the financial fear of people if they going to come out of this very tough situation. So actors are basically trying to imitate, first of all, governmental sites that offer relief, money relief, which is of course fake. They're also imitating online banking site, which is something that we already know and familiar with. But now they already started targeting working from home themed sites and platforms, and you're gonna see some of that right now. So if we talked about the financial part, then here it is. This is an example of the UK government relief page. It's of course completely fake, and they ask for the credentials so they can pay back your money, and people fall for that because they are very scared and are very concerned with their financial situation. We are also seeing a lot of online sessions or online meetings applications are being targeted. So for example, Cisco WebEx is very much used, and it's very common. And we see here an email advising that there are some vulnerabilities and you should update it. And then of course, a completely fake and a phishing page to enter your credentials there. So here you're also entering your organization credentials. It's not just your own private credentials, and they can infiltrate to organizations using that. Another thing that we are seeing is in phishing attacks targeting the organizational systems. So here it is, they're sending an email, allegedly from the IT of the company. This is from the help desk, but of course completely fake, advising to log into the staff portal, also a way to get to your organizational credentials. And here it is. This is, I think, the most interesting one. So here they are talking about the fact that we have lost a colleague to the deadly virus, which is, of course, completely fake, but they're trying to do whatever they can to scare people and, make them fear for their lives. And this is social engineering at its best, of course. And then they are targeting 360's environment that is also to phish the organizational credentials. Once you enter your credentials, you're being passed on to this page. And of course, you're not being logged into your organization's system. You're also seeing an increase in smishing and phishing attacks. So smishing is basically phishing attacks delivered by SMS. And of course, here we also see how they were affected by the pandemic. Here it is. The Red Cross is providing surgical masks, and of course, completely fake as well. Breaking news, banks may be closing. So again, scaring tactics. And also here, again, they are promised to help their citizens to combat the COVID-19 results. So this is about the phishing. I'm going to move on to the mobile threats, and the main one, the star of the mobile malware, will be the overlay malware for mobile. And the thing is that everyone are vulnerable. So if you have an app, you're vulnerable to being targeted by this mobile. And it's a global thing, very common. And we see that these are the main, there are several families, and these are the main ones that are targeting around the world. I'm going to show you just a short demo of Exobot, which is one family of the mobile overlay malware. So this is what you're going to see on the victim's end. And what you see here is that he's opening the Flash application. Of course, there is no Flash player for Android, so this is a fake application. And it basically, what it should do is just a malware to run on that device. So what will happen is that the malware will monitor for the victim's actions, and he will wait that the victim will open a targeted application. Here in this demo, we're using the cryptocurrency platform Coinbase. Now you see a window. He's just came up, and it's covering the legitimate application. This is a fake window asking for the victim's credentials. And this actor is really smart, and he's taking into consideration that we are all human and that we sometimes make mistakes. So what he will do is he will ask the victim to enter his credentials twice. Here it is. It will basically shake it and advise that the credentials are incorrect and there are typos there. And the user will enter his credentials once again. So for every victim, he has 2 instances of credentials just to make sure that the perfect fraud is being conducted and he just get away with it. So this is what we see on the victim's end. And as soon as he enters his credentials, the overlay screen disappears and the malware is just wrapped up. And now you were able to see the legitimate app. So moving on, let's talk about how it looks like from the actor's perspective. So of course, for every malware, there is a command and control panel to be able to see what the actor has obtained and who fell for his attack. So this is the CNC of one of the malware. And I'm just trying to present that. Okay, so this is the login screen. So if you have seen somewhere along the way old command and control panels, you know that this is a very much advanced one. It's very unique. It looks really good. The previous one, if you ever seen one, looks pretty bad. So they are getting more and more sophisticated and up to date. And the design looks really good. And here it is, Project News, once you're logged in. Of course, this was all reconstructed in our lab by our researchers. So you have Project News, which is updates, and it's really cool. You have statistics divided by country and language and tags and whatnot. And, you know, you can even make a KPI presentation for your boss, so which is the actor itself, but it's really good. It provides a lot of information. Here you can see all the common applications that are installed on the victims of your malware. So you can know what are the most common applications that are installed and that you should maybe imitate or consider for your next attack. Here you can see all the applications that the malware is targeting. And so today you don't need to know how the app looks like. You don't need to know how to create an app or anything like that. You just need the money and to purchase the correct kit that will provide you the option to just tick the checkbox of whatever application you want to target. And there it is, everything is ready. So you have in the screen all the overlay screens, the applications that they are targeting, the credentials that they're asking for, really good. And here you can see the bot details. So bot details is actually the victim details. And whatever victims that fell for this attack, you can see all of these details here. It's really cool. You can see his platforms, the versions that he's using. You can see a lot of things here. And of course, you can see the credentials that he has submitted, so you can use them. Another cool thing is that you don't just get the credentials and steal them. You can also bypass the 2FA stage. So the OTP, the one-time passcode, and all that. So what they actually do is they intercept the text message that is being sent to the user. So once they get the credentials and they obtain them, they try to log in on their end. The actor is trying to log in on his end to the legitimate application. And then an SMS is sent to the legitimate person and the victim for, to make sure that is the legitimate person. So what he can do is basically he can control his device and he can lock his screen and actually present him this Android update completely fake screen. And the user is not aware that he even got a text message. He can mute his device. The actor can mute the user's device and then delete it. And there it is, the perfect fraud, got the credentials, got the 2FA, and made the fraud and finished that. So moving on, we talk about COVID-19 changes, and we know that there were a lot of threats that are, they were in use before, but they have now advanced and again, taking advantage of this fear and everything that is going around. So we see a lot of ways to get rid of coronavirus and stuff like that. People are falling for that, of course. And one thing we see is the GIMP mobile malware that actually started as just an SMS stealer and has now advanced to target a lot of banking applications, is basically reusing Anubis code that leaked earlier this year and now has the capabilities of malware overlay and additional more. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So they're actually trying to sell us that this is an app that will help them identify who has the coronavirus around them. So if you can just pay a small amount and we will let you know who is infected around you, of course, completely fake. You enter your credit card's credentials and there it is. They just got your credentials and this is not the amount that you're actually going to lose. You're going to lose a significant more amount, not that they can commit the account takeover. So we talked about all these threats and everything looks really, really scary, but we can do a lot of things to address that. So one thing is to leverage AI solutions and mechanism. So if we talk about AI in a really high-level manner, these are a lot of mechanisms and engines that we can teach. So for example, in this slide, you can see the apples. You provide the engine the apples and you tell them, these are apples. So you teach that and then this machine or this environment can identify the next apples in line because it's now familiar with that. So this is a very high level, of course, but now let's talk about how you can actually use that to tackle all the threats that we talked about, or at least some of them. So for example, we talked about remote access attacks, and we know for a fact that in a remote access, the mouse movements will be delayed. There is a short delay. So for example, here, if you take a look to the left, you can see a regular mouse movement, a regular computer, what it looks like. Everything is looks like almost a line, very crowded, let's call it this way. And if you look to the right, you can see that the dots are really not connected. There is a significant delay between the mouse movements, and this is one indication that this is the person that is using a different machine or reusing remote access to the legitimate person. Another thing you can do with AI is you can actually compare the code of phishing attacks and see, or potential phishing attacks, and see there if there are things that are raising any flags. So for example, this is a hijacked website to the right. This is the domain. And on this domain, you have the page to the left, which is the full attack targeting a significant targeted organization. So you can actually understand that these themes are very not related at all. And if you have a legitimate general site, you know that the theme will be very, very similar. Another thing we can do is identify usage of legitimate logos, so you can identify that. And And that's, just the tip of the iceberg. So if we talk about what we need to apply, so for the next week, you should start looking for the blind spots in your security process and existing solutions. There must be some of them, and you just need to take a look and do some brainstorming. In the first 3 months of this presentation, you should assess the threats of your organization is likely to experience and financial losses. Define a protection strategy that will reduce cost and friction to your clients. You can, get some help from external companies and services. That's also really good to do. And within the 6 months, you should select a seamless omni-channel solution based on AI and machine learning with combination of customized heuristics and rules of security protection. So the omni-channel here is really a major thing. We need to make sure that the user journey in its total is, we are aware of that, and we'll make sure that we need to identify this is the correct process that is being done, and no one is trying to tackle that. Another thing is just to continue to assess the ever-changing threat landscape and associated risk. As you see, it's constantly changing, and we need to make sure that we are up to speed and are protecting our endpoints and clients and whatnot. So I'm gonna wrap up right now. This is our recommendations, and thank you for your time.